higher education changed my life. And it's one of the reasons why I wouldn't want to work in any other industry. I want to like capture that magic, the impact that it had on me. What we get to do, which is like tell the story of that magic, that's just like, it's amazing. It's something that I'm really, really passionate about.
Hey, welcome to the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast, a show where we bring together Marcom leaders from both inside and outside higher ed to give you fresh perspectives on successful organic content creation and strategy in higher education. My name is John Azzoni. I'm the founder at Unveiled, a video production company working specifically with colleges on their storytelling and commercial video content. You can learn more about our work at unveiled.tv. That's UNVEILD. And if creating content that resonates emotionally with your audience is a priority for you, then you need to be subscribed to the Higher Ed Storytellers Digest. It's my weekly newsletter where we cover a lot of ground about content creation and strategy in higher ed. So sign up for that for free at unveiled.tv/newsletter. All right, let's get on with the show. My guest today is Tony Sheridan. Tony is an Irishman in the desert, which we'll get more into, and he is the marketing and communications manager working at Kaust in Saudi Arabia for the last 4 years. He has over 15 years of experience working in higher education. His work has won awards all over the world, and he is a regular keynote and chair of conferences globally. Tony, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, John. I am a big fan of yours. Love what you do. It's so aligned to the way I think, and I learned so much from your newsletter, from this podcast. So fanboying now and delighted to be on the show.
Oh, well, the feeling is mutual. I've seen you around LinkedIn a lot, and I feel like I've seen you in chats and conferences too, in the chat section.
Yeah.
So it's good to finally get you on here. Tell me something that people would be surprised to know about you.
Well, I think one thing that surprises people, given that I lead like big marketing and communications campaigns, is that my undergraduate degree was in woodwork teaching. So I did a joint bachelor's of technology and education. And even, more surprising is I never wanted to go to university. Or how would I put it? I got my offer for university when I was 18 and I threw it into trash, right? And can I dive into a bit of a story here?
Go for it. Yeah.
About storytelling, why not? But, I came from a working class family, rural Ireland. My dad he's about to retire, but he's been in the same factory for over 40 years. And my mom, who's unfortunately passed away a while ago, but, she didn't even finish high school, right? And so I had two older sisters. They left school and they went into jobs. That's what you do. One went into hairdressing, one went into being a chef. Now, I was like really studious. I was a bit of a nerd, except I couldn't really be a nerd because I pissed off my teachers, because I asked too many questions and I challenged them a bit. But I was super studious. I loved learning. I was so curious. And but what you did at that time, I had a part-time job since I was 12 years old. So from 14, 15, 16, 17, in the summers, I was working in construction, mixing cement to build traditional Irish stone walls at the front of houses. Really beautiful. But when I graduated high school, I graduated top of my class, and I went to be working on a building site, right? And so August comes around, so it's September intake in Ireland, and I get a phone call. And it throws me back to about a year earlier where my career guidance teacher was like, you have to apply to universities. And I was like, but I'm not going. I've got this job lined up in a building site. She goes, everyone in the class has to do it. You have to do it. So I put down some schools, and she said, tick this box. You're eligible for this access program, which helps students from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, from underrepresented groups, get into university. And this call was from a woman from that program. And she was like, why are you not coming to college? And I was like, whoa, what's going on? Her name is Joanna McDarby. And I just said, look, I want to work, all these different things. But she wouldn't take no for an answer. So she rang my mom. She's like, why doesn't he want to go to college? My mom's like, I don't know. He's got a girlfriend in the hometown. He doesn't want to move away. So she rings me and she's like, this university was about 5 hours drive away. And she goes, there's so many beautiful girls in Limerick. You're going to love it. I said, but I love my girlfriend. She goes, yeah, but long distance can work. So It takes 15 phone calls between my mom and me to convince me to come to the University of Limerick for 2 weeks. She said, come try it out. And if you don't like it, you can defer your place for a year. And what she hadn't told me was the deferral window had already passed. And so I couldn't do that. She had accepted my course on my behalf. So 15 phone calls to get me to the University of Limerick. 15 years later, I left the University of Limerick to come to Saudi Arabia. I did my undergraduate there. When I graduated, I went into postgraduate studies. And then I ended up being the first ever social media and digital content officer of the university, establishing its social presence, its approach to videos, and everything. And so education, higher education, changed my life. And it's one of the reasons why I wouldn't want to work in any other industry. I want to like capture that magic, the impact that it had on me. Now, I also said that, my sisters hadn't went to university, but and I have a younger brother. And with my success, I made sure my younger brother went to university. But what's more interesting is my two older sisters went back as mature students. They got their bachelor's degrees. One is a single mom. She went on and got her master's. And actually, my brother and both of my sisters got their master's degrees before I got mine. So, and my best friend who drove a forklift for 7 years, he saw what I was doing. He's like, I'm going to go to university. And now he's the head of marine data collection in Ireland. So higher education is just transformative. It's like something that I'm so passionate about. And then what we get to do, which is like tell the story of that magic, that's just like, it's amazing. It's something that I'm really, really passionate about.
Yeah. So we had Michelle McMahon on a couple months ago from University of Limerick. And so you were sort of like the prequel to Michelle, I guess, if we want to put it that way. Is that true?
Let's put her in the category of like Godfather Part 2 and Terminator 2, because she's like better than the original. Like I developed, a student social media officer program with, great support and input from an amazing manager, Sheena Doyle there. And yeah, we were kind of like two ships passing in the night. I was leaving for Saudi Arabia. She was just coming in. I think we got to work together for 2 weeks, but she's then taken on the mantle of some of the programs and she's just brought them to the stratosphere because she's just incredible. But yeah, that's my old stomping ground. So I was over social and digital there for 5 years. And before that, I worked in student engagement. And before that, I was doing a PhD, which I dropped out of.
All right. Yeah. So for our listeners, if you have listened to or haven't listened to the episode with Michelle, that would be a great one to listen to see kind of like what's going on today at University of Limerick. But kind of like going back in time here, Tony, I want to hear like what was some of the foundations that you laid at University of Limerick during your time there, because I understand like you started the TikTok and it was like award winning or something.
Yeah,
you did a bunch of cool stuff.
We did loads of cool stuff, which is so funny. I was like, in one way I was a team of one, but you're never really a team of one if you have a great manager supporting you. But then also we had this like internships, we had student social media officers, we had freelancers, and I kind of worked with them to deliver. Yeah, one of the things I'm most proud of, and I mean, in fact, coming in with a woodwork teaching degree, jumping into marketing and communications just with like a passion for storytelling and a knowledge of the university, I was enabled by a great director, Mark McQueen, who was like, go push boundaries. I don't need to know what's cool on Snapchat. I don't need to know, about this. I trust you, and he would just set out, what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve here? Like, why are we trying to get good at Snapchat? Why are we trying to have a great Instagram account? And keep that in mind and then work towards that success. But with the TikTok account, yeah, TikTok, it's like a great moment in my career. I remember being at a conference in the UK and telling the people there who were all running social for universities that I was going to set up a TikTok. And they were like, what's TikTok? Right? They didn't even know. And I had only found out because my 16-year-old cousin had become like TikTok famous. He had 60,000 followers. And I was like, I'm running social media and I don't even know this platform. And my 16-year-old cousin, it's got 60,000 followers. So there must be something in it. And when I started out on TikTok, I think my first 4 TikToks were complete flops, right? And I realized I don't really get this platform, right? So now this is so funny because I've had to delete TikTok off my phone because it's so addictive. But back at that time, I had to set like a time in my calendar, in my Outlook calendar, to force myself to go on TikTok and watch TikToks to like start to understand what TikTok was. Because
Yeah.
I guess now it's broadened out, but at that time it was more niche, particularly to the market that we were trying to recruit for undergraduate students. And I took a break. I was like, okay, clearly I don't get it. I'm flopping here. And then I came back in the last week of August in 2019 with we had graduation week and then we had orientation week for all the new students, and literally hit like 2 million views on videos, 250,000 views on videos, 1 million view on videos, just like hit after hit after hit. And some like, no, I wouldn't call them flops, but like, not viral content,
Right.
but really, really loved that short form video switch from the type that we were doing and just being super creative and working with students. And yeah, TikTok then reached out at one point on the university's Twitter account, weirdly, was like DMing us and was like, who runs your TikTok? And I was like, that's me, the same person that runs all the social. They're like, you have one of the most engaged TikToks of any university in the world.
Wow.
I was like, that was like a real moment for me that I've made it. Like
Hmm.
mentally, it's like I came into this field and at that time had zero qualifications in the area since I've got my master's in marketing. But at that time, it was just like self taught on YouTube. And we can talk about like my formula of how I like taught myself stuff because I think that's maybe relevant. But yeah, it was really amazing to just go, right, I actually know what I'm doing. And then maybe 6, 7 months later into this strategy, I get a message on LinkedIn from a university in Saudi Arabia. And they're like, do you want to come have an adventure and tell stories in the desert? And well, I clearly said yes.
That's great. I love that. And I think that some of the best people at their craft are ones that are not formally trained. And I just find that really to be the case. It's not all the time, but like sometimes these like really, gems of creative people that, I've stumbled upon and had the opportunity to like, hire as freelancers or whatever, like in the video world, they just kind of figured it out. Like they just figured out video. They kind of had a knack for creativity and for storytelling, and then they just figured out the tech stuff and how to light scenes and all this stuff. And those are some of the most talented people, because I think they just like don't have the structure of the rules of like how you're supposed to do things. They're just coming in and breaking things and figuring out what works. So I
And
love that.
2016, when I started running the whole, the central accounts at the university, really was the wild west of social media because there was no degree programs in it at that time. There was no formal study. It really wasn't respected at the top table in terms of like a medium in the way that it would be now, 9 years later. So the way that I approached it, and I hadn't just landed into central comms. I had been running social media accounts and creating content for student engagement accounts. And that's how I came to the attention of the central marketing team. And the way that I did it and the way that other people did it wrong, I call this the art of inspiration. You can also call it stealing other people's ideas, but it
Hmm.
sounds much nicer if I call it the art of inspiration. But what I realized people were doing wrong was we all know what good storytelling is. Like maybe an Irishman who grew up with a dad who's a great storyteller and a grandmother who's a great storyteller. Maybe I have like a better flair for it, but every single person like knows what good storytelling is. But then when it came to applying that to their content, it would just like they'd put up this barrier and they'd just do
Hmm.
really bad storytelling. And I'd always say, surely if they looked at that content themselves before putting it out, they would have known instinctively it's not good, right? And so I was using my gut and my instincts as an audience to inform my practice as a practitioner. And I think the mistake that people made, particularly if they didn't understand the mediums well, was they'd look at a university. In Ireland, we had Trinity College. It was the oldest and the most prestigious, but they'd also look at, Oxford or Cambridge or, whatever the big names that they respected.
Hmm.
And then they would see what they were doing on social or video and then just copy that. Right.
Hmm.
And so that's okay, but add in a few extra steps. So you look at what they're doing and then you ask, is it good?
Yeah.
Right? Like that has to be the next question. And if you're like, yes, it is good, it engaged me, I enjoyed it, or I got value out of it, then you would say, why is it good? Right? And this is the question I would ask myself. Like, they're really good on Snapchat. We want to be good on Snapchat. What is it that's good about this? Right? Not
Mhm.
like a super, it's fun. It engaged me because it made me laugh, or it was really entertaining, or is educating. So finding that out. And then the next question I'd ask is, would this work for us?
Mm.
Because some of the way Oxford or MIT or Cambridge would apply brand and engage audiences doesn't work for the youngest university in Ireland that's kind of a sports school and it's a really fun place. That's not going to work. And then, but if it could work, so it's like, what did they do? Is it good? Yes. What's good about it? Would it work for us? Yes. I would just switch up some stuff and then do it. And that made original content. Or the best stuff I did was take like one idea from here and one idea from there and mash them together into something like unique and new. Particularly, what a lot of people weren't doing that give me a bit of an edge was they were exclusively looking for inspiration of other universities and colleges. So it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. Like they were
Mhm.
limited to only getting inspired or stealing ideas off within their industry. Whereas I was like social media native. I was consuming content from NASA going, how do they do science storytelling? Or NFL teams, or US universities, UK universities, Australian universities, to just like washing detergent stuff. Like it's just like if anyone was doing something cool, I could just take this art of the inspiration process, run it through my brain and go, okay, if I switch this and do this, this is going to work for us.
Mhm.
And then you just put the content out and you learn what's a hit, what's a miss. You keep looking at your data, you seeing what got engagement, what didn't. And over time doing that, that's how I got good at my craft. And if I didn't know a technical thing, I just spent a half an hour on YouTube. And
Mhm.
then I knew that enough to get the next piece of content out. And over time, that just built this uniquely successful kind of skill set.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I love you said the blind leading the blind. I think that's so true of higher ed. We copy each other, but no one's really taking a second to be like, well, wait, is that is that even good? Is that a good slogan? We're just copying each other's slogans. Your journey starts here and your story starts here, whatever. It's just like,
Right.
well, yeah, they're doing it. We got to have one of those too. And then it's like, but like you're just perpetuating the boringness in
And
higher ed.
I think, can I say shit on your podcast? I'm not going to shit.
Sure.
I'm Irish and it's very normal to swear, which by the way, in Saudi Arabia, it's not. So I had a lot of like in the office here, we've got like English people and Irish people, and we're like, F this. So we have to like tail that back. But I'm glad I can say shit in your podcast. I don't want to shit on any school in particular, but I think one of the mistakes that people make in the industry is assuming high ranking school equals best practice on social and
Hmm.
digital platforms. And it can often be the inverse because if you've got the brand of X top ranked school, you often don't need to work that hard to be creative and good. Now, I will shout out MIT because they're an exception. Jenny Leafather happens to be amazing, but MIT doesn't have to be as amazing as they are
Yeah,
at social, right?
they are very
Others,
good.
and so then people look at these people who are like, okay, they're top schools, but I would recommend looking for inspiration, one, outside of higher ed, but then two, to those fighter schools. Is there a school that jumped from 300 in the ranking to like 170? Like whatever they did was amazing. Now it mightn't have just been in their digital storytelling, right? But I would go look because I bet you if they're that dynamic and they're moving, they're doing something cool. And so they tend to be the ones that I would have watched that I really got like good inspiration. And then the next thing I would do is like, who is that? Because it's not just a school. That's like normally a person driving that. And then I built my network in Europe by going to conferences to speak about what I was doing and finding the guy that like it was Liam that ran Loughborough, Dave Musson, who used to be at Warwick, like all these guys, and like go meet them and have a coffee with them and learn from them.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And I too love looking for inspiration outside of higher ed because I think there's a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in higher ed, a lot of cool stuff going on outside of higher ed too. Hey, do you have a B-roll library that you're excited about? Do you want one? Because if content repurposing is something that you kind of geek out about, this is especially for you. And I want to tell you about my friends Jay and Tara at Walsh College, who brought a dying content strategy back to life just from a simple 2-day shoot with Unveiled that resulted in a massive B-roll library for them. Here they are.
So in early 22, we had a big leadership change across almost all departments. The direction of the college started to become more clear. Once we had that real clarity of who we are as Walsh College, the content creation of everything else became much easier to do. And the commercial ended up being the exciting piece that we could tie everybody into in all departments and get everybody excited about what was to come. So we did a commercial in 2018, and then we didn't do one again until 2022. And in that time, we had exhausted every asset from all of it. We were really using a lot of stock image, a lot of things that were just very non-authentic. So the engagement on everything was low. The numbers in our enrollment was going right down with it. When John and I first talked, he was talking about this subscription base that he had, which I thought was really cool. It's a really unique idea to be able to make sure you have content ongoing. I knew it wasn't in the budget for us, so we decided to do a one-off. So what we did was we tacked on one commercial and 2 student slash alumni interviews. When we took the B-roll from all sides. So we took the B-roll from the commercial day, we took the B-roll from the student day. I've now gotten a year's worth of content. And really it's gonna stretch even further because I still have stuff I haven't even used because of the amount of things that we were able to do inside of a 2-day shoot.
There's so much footage that you get back. It's almost shocking how much additional there is for you to work with, which is why we've been able to build out entirely new videos using clips that no one has seen before or take screenshots from it and without repeating it. It's been a huge transformation in the way that we can market and the way that I can design.
We're seeing an increased traffic flow into the website. We're seeing alumni coming back and thanking us for the directions that we're going. I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of the efforts that we're doing, but none of that happens without the excitement that comes from getting the name out there and getting people to understand that Walsh is changing. And we're changing into a direction that's exciting for not only our future students, but our existing students and our alumni as well.
So whether we're working together on a commercial campaign like we did for Walsh or an annual storytelling subscription, you get to keep all the B-roll and raw interview footage at no additional cost. And that alone could be super transformative to your ability to create ongoing content with limited resources. So book a call with me to chat further at unveiled.tv. Unveiled is spelled Unveiled. All right, let's get back to the show. So you've interviewed a lot of people and done a lot of storytelling. So I want to know from you, like, what's your philosophy about like what makes a good story? What do you want to see more of in higher ed?
Yeah, so I think I counted up recently. I've told the story of 125 people here at KAUST in the last 4 years and about 500 in my career, just in video alone. And so I can't even count up the written or like the short social media profiles that we did. So it's a lot of me being the interviewer, right? Trying to get the story out. I think what higher ed has got wrong historically is a thing that I really feel like you put your finger on the pulse of, was this idea of like narrative over declarative. And it's just always, or more often than not, declarative. It's this list of features rather than the benefits. And when I try and explain this to people here in work, I use the example of the iPod, like when they launched the iPod and they said, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Yeah. Right? They didn't go into the technical specifications. If you went to the website, you got the technical specifications. But what they sold was the benefit. And so when we look at postgraduate studies, and I did an analysis of this for a conference presentation last year, and I got 20 different ads for postgraduate studies at universities. And they all focused on the features, right? Not the benefits. And I don't do, I'm in the market. Maybe I'll do an MBA next year. I'm not in it because it's got, 3 semesters or 2 semesters, or it's got these features. I want to know those things before I make the decision. But what sells it, what markets it to me, is the benefits. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear about the guy that did this, did it while working, and then got a promotion, right?
Right.
Like, I want to hear from the alum who tells me the benefit. That's the thing that I want. And so in our storytelling, we could pull it back to not really knowing what we're trying to achieve, right? And I think that people just so often don't have that grand narrative or goal in mind when they're creating content.
Yeah. Yeah. Not knowing what you want to achieve, not knowing what makes something, different. Like I've led video projects in the past where, someone would be like, okay, we don't want to be like all these other, whatever, my corporate video days could have been any sort of company, not higher ed necessarily. But, and then you would deliver like the first version of what we felt was different. And then by the time they got done with it, it was just like any other video, and I think we need to have a better understanding of what different looks like. And I also think that you mentioned narrative versus declarative storytelling. I think there's a lot of confusion around storytelling because that word gets thrown around so much. So people think that everything's a story, and everything, they hear about the scientific, benefits of storytelling and marketing, and they think they're accessing that when they're really just kind of like putting information over a dramatic song, and and it's not really doing the science thing, that a narrative story would do. So I've learned to embrace both sides, like both definitions of storytelling, because I think storytelling, that word, has evolved to just be this catch-all for like, marketing your organization in a, I guess more towards like emotions, or like more in just a more creative way, and kind of like over time communicating the value of your, institution, which is to say, sort of storytelling globally, even just through all these little short form videos or just little LinkedIn posts or whatever, you're sort of telling the story. But, I think people need to really get a better understanding of like, if you really want to like really do storytelling, that's a thing. Like, there's definitive markers about what make a good story.
Like, I agree with you that if you don't do storytelling, but you do create like highly visual, emotionally engaging, good content, that over time, in some way, you are telling a story, you're painting a picture. Maybe the audience, if you're lucky enough, treads the needle through those pieces and creates a narrative themselves about who you are as a brand. But the analogy that I use, and it goes back to this art of the inspiration like process that I had, that there was a key point, which is like, what makes this good, right?
Yeah.
Is it good? And then what makes it good? And often the thing that makes it good is storytelling, right? A narrative. And that can be, you can tell a story in 6 words, right? You can tell a story, I learned, in a 15-second TikTok. I prefer sometimes telling stories with longer runtime in a video or longer form article, but you can tell it. And when people don't do that analysis as to what makes it good, when they can end up making something that they think is storytelling, they think it's the same thing as this, and it didn't succeed. And I had that experience where someone from another university come up to me and they had said, we're doing what you're doing on TikTok and it's not working. And I knew, I had seen their account, and I took perhaps too much joy in the fact that their videos had like 6 views and ours were getting like 60,000 or 2 million. And I just said to the person, I said, you're not doing the same thing. It looks similar. It's on the same platform and it's vertical and it's got a student in it, but it's not storytelling, right? And I used an analogy and I said, someone could see me make a cake, right? And they could be like trying to copy me making a cake. And they could put it in the oven and they could take it out and it could look like the cake. And in air terms, professionally, that would be like a well-lit video with good music, with a student in it, talking about nice things about the university in like, and they're cool and the B-roll is cool, right? But to me, let's say they were copying me make the cake and they missed that I put sugar in it. And their cake looks like my cake, but their cake tastes like shit, right?
They put
And
salt in
that's
it instead of
right.
sugar.
They put salt in it, right? Because they thought it was the same thing. And to me, that magic ingredient, the difference between the salt and the sugar, is narrative versus declarative. And so you think you've made a delicious cake, you've made something that looks like a cake that tastes like shit. And that's the difference. And that's the analogy that I use. It's like the magic ingredient here, that sugar, that's storytelling. And there are definitive markers of that. I think one interesting thing, I work with universities around the world, I speak at conferences around the world, and I try and get people past that barrier of these institutional corporate blockers of what other people want and stakeholder needs, to get back to their core understanding, their like ancient DNA of
Yeah.
storytelling, and get back to going, is this good storytelling? Because you know what good storytelling is. And as much as I appeal to the fact that we all have this inherent ancient understanding of storytelling, I do also think it's important to acknowledge that some of the traditional storytelling arcs and mechanisms need to be shaken up a bit in the digital world, right?
Yeah.
So, like the traditional movie, we slowly build, you kind of
Right.
do exposition, then you get to like the peak, maybe there's slight, you think it's resolving, more conflict, resolution, conclusion. You can't really do that in content online in short form, at least, right? Like maybe
Right.
there's some formats in video where you can do that, where you have a captive audience. But part of the same drivers, the same fundamental drivers exist in terms of what gets our attention, holds our attention. I think you just have to work harder for it now. In some ways, you have more opportunity because it can be easier to make content. It can be, there's more audience accessible than there was 30 years ago, but there's more content than ever before. And if you want to do that effectively, we need to take storytelling, the traditional ancient art, and we need to just apply some developments for the digital age in 2025. And primarily, I think, and I'd love to get your input on that, but to me, it's really about the hook, putting the hook clean at the start, and then varying the pace, but re-hooking people during the content. If you want to keep me
Yeah.
for 2 minutes, you got to hook me multiple times within that. One of the mistakes that I think people then lean into, they think that they need to be at like in this range from 95 to 100% the whole way through the video. But that's actually really annoying also if you're just shouting at me trying to keep my attention for the
Yeah.
whole 95, for the whole 2 minutes. But you probably need to go from 95, ease down to 60, pull me back up to 90. Then you can take a bit of a dip to get deeper and then pull me up at the end.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's why finding a good video editor is really hard, because there's very few that really understand those dynamics about what, pacing and like what keeps an audience engaged. And like, even just like, I find probably the number one trick that I do when I'm editing is changing the song. Every time the tone shifts, or every time like the messaging kind of shifts, we have a new song going on, and you might not even notice the transition, but there's something that I feel like it's like, okay, we're seeing something new here. There's a new vibe. And yeah. And like, if you listen to like a good speaker, public speaker, yeah, they do. It's like, they take you on this roller coaster. It's like, we're up here, now we're down here, now we're talking really quietly, and now now I'm moving around the stage and stuff like that. So it really is a theater almost, that you have to kind of understand how to control that sort of theatrical element of storytelling, which is why it's not as simple as just saying things into a microphone and slapping a symphony dramatic song underneath it.
But you talked about, there is a place for that. Like I think you call them sizzle reels, where it's like it's just gonna bring the energy. But and there's a place for that kind of like boom, 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 boom. I'm gonna hit you for 30 seconds with like really just ramp you up, like game night video or something.
Yeah.
But I think when we get down to storytelling, we're saying, you need to hook, you need to rehook. That can be maybe difficult for those, tuning in to apply. One of the
Right.
best ways that I've seen it described was Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the writers of South Park.
Yeah.
And I found like a random video on YouTube where it seems like it's from 20 years ago. And I think they're at NYU, or they're at some university, and they're explaining to like their writing concept, like the breakthrough that they had for South Park. And basically how it works is they said if they looked at their scenes at like a base level and it went like this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, they had a very boring episode. And
Yep.
it needed to be two things. This happened, but, right?
Yeah.
This happened, therefore. So they
Right.
just go from and then to but and therefore. And so
Yeah.
what would that look like in higher ed, right? Well, we've seen loads of the this and this and this and this and this, right? The course is this long and the professors, and it's small class sizes and this and this and this. But true storytelling would be something like, let's go to the benefits. So, I've been working for 5 years and I really wanted to take the next step. But being a single mom, it's really hard to dedicate time. And it's like, however, and then it's like,
Yeah.
X school had an online learning program that really met my needs. But going to study was really, really hard. However, they had this really good program. And if you can pair that with some of the brilliant techniques you have around like asking the right questions and getting that moment rather than just the information, I think we can apply that like South Park principle into some like higher ed storytelling. Maybe not like as blatantly as short form video creators do. It's like, this scientist had this, but you'll never believe
Right.
what happened. And
Yeah.
the last one is the most interesting. So please,
I hate when they do it.
we don't want to get that cliched, but if we break it down to the avoid the and then, or this, and we get to the but, therefore, right? And so that's the principle that the South Park creators had. Another writer, Aaron Sorkin, he calls it intention and obstacle. So if you were thinking about looking at the benefits of postgraduate studies, you would say like intention, career progression, obstacle, not being able to compete in the job market, being overlooked in job interviews. And so you set out that there's the intention and the obstacle. And that's how they make like dramatic movies. There's like the characters want to do something and there's an obstacle in their way. That, just those simple terms, we could probably pull in a bit more into higher ed storytelling.
Yeah, I'd kind of say like there's a difference between like a story and like a profile on somebody. A profile might just be more like they're this, and you can take their class and whatever, maybe like a faculty profile. And I think there's a lot of value to that. Like not everything has to be this like there's value in getting to know your professor, right? And do they have to have some sort of dramatic story arc in order for you to put them in front of the camera? No. I mean, just, there's value in just kind of like, who is this person? What do they care about? And that's kind of like that. And then kind of stuff. But yeah, some of those more really gripping stories, if there is like ways that you can get some conflict into there, or like, yeah, like everything didn't work out. Or like, I didn't always want to study this field because I wanted to do this other thing, but it didn't work out. I mean, like, yeah, I think there's room for both. And I think there's room for like, yeah, these profiles on students and alumni and things like that. But not every person's story needs to be forced into this like hero's journey. But it is a tried and true kind of format where if you can hit on that, it's powerful.
And it really depends on where's the content going, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if you want to engage me on social media, a story is probably going to do it better. But if I've landed on a course page and I want information about that program where I'm at a different part of the funnel, then my attention span is switched up. The way that you can communicate information to me is switched up. And then the pressure for that like hero's journey or story arc, it's just not there. It goes back to my dad used to tell a story. Whenever my father would tell a story, he'd always present it as if it was something real that happened, And so he said, like, last Friday, I was driving home from work, right? And my brother would always go, Dad, is this a real story? And my dad would like roll his eyes and go, anyway, that was an
Yeah.
indication that this was completely fake, right? So it was just a joke set up as like a real thing that happened. But in this story, which I heard him tell many times, he's driving home from work on a Friday evening and he's stuck in traffic. And along the side of the road, there's a grass verge. And he can see up ahead of him two workers from the, let's say, city council, that you call it in the US. And they've got their like visibility jackets on. And one of them's just digging a hole. And then he walks like 2 meters up. And there's a guy coming behind him. And he's taking the dirt and he's putting it back into the hole. My dad's like, am I seeing things? And, you know, it's Friday traffic, rush hour. So he's just like stuck in traffic and he's seeing them. Eventually he gets closer and closer to the lights. And these guys have been doing this for like 20 minutes. And he's right beside them. And yeah, sure enough, one guy's like digging the hole. The other guy comes and puts the dirt back in. And then they walk on a little bit and do it again. So my dad puts down the window of the car. He's like, hey guys. We're like, hey. He says, can I ask you, like, what are you doing? One guy says, oh, what am I doing? Well, I'm digging holes. And the other guy says, oh, what am I doing? Well, I'm filling the holes in. And dad says, yeah, no, I can see that. But like, am I missing something? The guy goes, missing. Oh, yeah, I suppose Paddy's missing. And my dad says, well, what does Paddy do? He goes, oh, Paddy's the guy that plants the trees.
Oh.
So this joke, when my dad tells it, is meant to talk about like the inefficiencies of like the public services, right? That they just like kept doing the thing without the most important part of it. But then I tell that story in a work context because I think so much of what people are doing is just like digging a hole and filling it back in again. Like in a work context, it's like, oh, they did this thing, like they did that. So we do that and then I do that. And to take a step back and ask, what's the tree we're trying to plant here? Like, that's the important thing. What's the tree we're trying to plant? And that's strategy. That's generally the story. And if you know what the overall tree is, like for COUS, the university I'm working in, we want to be seen as an enabler of innovation, right? As key partnerships. Commercializing research is a big thing we want to tell, and academic and research excellence. So I know what the big grand narrative is. And then this piece of content can just be a leaf on a branch, right? But I know what I'm trying to do here. And if you don't think about that each time you jump into a pot of content or something, if you don't know what the tree you're trying to plant is, then effectively you're just like these guys digging holes and filling them back in again.
Yeah. I love that. I love that analogy. All right. We got a few minutes left here. I want to get you talking about your work in Saudi Arabia. And, you know, you had some interesting, you know, storytelling stuff that you were involved in with the Saudi women. So I want to hear about that. What did you learn from that? What was that experience like from you?
I think the interesting thing about coming to Saudi when I did, and Saudi is like the biggest success story in the world now in terms of just its economy, but also socially changing. But historically, women were excluded from media, right? So it was just not a thing to see a woman in an advertisement, in a video, digital content. And this was, when I say history, I don't mean ancient history. I'm talking these social changes, these big changes were brought in starting in 2016 with the new Crown Prince, but really only in 2019 did this start to change. And in 2020, I get offered a job to come to COUS and start telling stories. And this is a moment where we're literally talking about, particularly when we look at video, stories that were never told in this way before. Now, COUS, where I work, first mixed gender university in the country, it has master's and PhD students only, and it's got a 40% female student body in a science and tech only university. Like, this is bucking international trends in terms of like female participation in the sciences. We have like first generation college student Saudi females, like grandma, mom, sisters, never went to university, going on to get PhDs, being like the first in the world in certain stuff. And I got to go like interview them and put them on screen. And so that has just been amazing. It's brought me loads of passion and purpose to my job. I went on to like win the award at Content Ed in 23 for like Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Award for the champion of that, because it wasn't, we had a country that was ready for change in terms of the stories it was going to tell. But it wasn't just so easy to just jump into that because we had cultural norms that were changing. We had sensitivities to be aware of. I'm also clearly not Saudi. I'm not Muslim. I'm a white Irish guy coming into this Islamic culture and the Middle East that I hadn't even been to before I moved here to work here. But apart from it just being an amazing journey and the people of Saudi being so ready to embrace these powerful, amazing women and have their stories told on video in this cool way, I think part of the success that we had was also just having systems and processes that really aligned what we're doing to like, what is that tree we're trying to plant? One simple technique that I would advise anyone to do was that I just wrote down pillars that would underpin what I was doing, right? So I had 12 that I brainstormed with the team and I got them signed off my director. But like they included that I want this content going forward to be human. What does that mean? Before, we would like write about the research, text on screen, but we would exclude the human because it wasn't the cultural norm. Women weren't like put on the screen. So I want it to be human. I want to show the human in the content. I want it to be diverse, like our campus is diverse, 120 nationalities working and living here. I want it to be representative, right? I want to show the people that are doing this. I want it to be authentic. So I wrote out these pillars. And what that did was it helped me when I was going into a conversation with senior leaders. We had this one campaign where the very senior person had picked the professors to feature in a faculty campaign. And he had picked 12 men, right? And we have a very diverse faculty. And I could go into the room and I only had a 15-minute meeting to pitch this campaign. And I said, look, these were just like my thoughts and philosophies on what content should be. But because I had them written down in a nice, graphic, I had said, well, look, yeah, we can do that and we can make an accessible campaign and we can make an optimized campaign and a strategy aligned campaign, but we can't make diverse campaign and a representative campaign. So what if we profiled faculty and we included some of your 12, but we also included some junior faculty and some female faculty and some from this division and that division. So having a structure like that allowed and enabled me to make organizational change in a really simple way, I would recommend that to anyone. Go just sit and write down the 10, 12, 6 things that you want your content to be. Call it something fancy, like our metric framework alignment with Harvard standards or whatever. And then when anyone says, no, do this, you say, oh, well, that doesn't align with our pillars, actually. Right. That just worked so much better than me saying, no, I think you, Mr. Senior Leader, I'm disagreeing with you. So I'd say, no, I like where you're going, but it doesn't align with our pillars. But let's find a way to achieve your goal that aligns with more of these pillars.
Yeah, I like that. The answer is always yes, but yes, and here's what it's going to cost to get there. All right. Final thoughts on story. What would be something you want to leave our audience with about storytelling in higher ed?
Well, look, I started out talking about my journey into higher ed. Higher ed changes lives, right? It's so important. But a part of that story was I was working construction and then I did a degree in construction and then we had to jump some steps, but I ended up running the social media for a university, right? And how I could do that was just by tapping into my own knowledge of storytelling that wasn't formally taught. It was just built in. And when I do consulting or go to conferences, all I'm really doing is try to pull that back. And you can do that yourself. So I ask people, if tomorrow or next week you're creating a piece of content, use your own gut and ask yourself in the planning or in the edit stage, is this good? Would I engage with this content? And if you did that more, if the industry did that more, we'd be really much more successful at creating great content that achieves those goals. That we wouldn't be digging holes and filling them back in again. We'd really be planting some trees.
Gold. Love that. That was solid. So Tony, thanks so much for being here. It's great to finally get you on the show. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom. It's been great to hear all your, storytelling stories and all your philosophies and stuff like that. So thanks for being here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Love that.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. 3 things I want to invite you to before you go. Number 1, if you want to know what's working right now in higher ed video, like what videos are getting tons of views, likes, comments, all that. You can get ungated access to our report, aptly named What's Working in Higher Ed Video, a comprehensive guide for higher ed Marcom leaders and content creators. So check it out at unveiled.tv/higheredvideo, and you might want to bookmark it because it's designed to be a resource for you that you can keep referring back to for inspiration. Number 2, reminder to sign up for my free newsletter all about content creation and strategy at unveiled.tv/newsletter. And number 3, follow me on LinkedIn. If you're searching for me, my name is John Azzoni. It's spelled Johnazoni. I'm on there all day, every day, for better or for worse, posting regular content and engaging with folks like you. So I'd love to connect with you on there. And with that, we'll catch you on the next episode of the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast. And as always, I am cheering you on. Okay, bye.